I'm warning you now, the southern United States is not what you think. It's darker, stranger, and far more real than you were ever told. Here, history isn't in books. It's in the empty roads, the silent swamps, and the secrets no one wanted to forget. And when you hear these stories, you'll understand why the South never stopped whispering. 33. The Great Galveston Deluge. The 1900 hurricane in Galveston, Texas remains the deadliest natural disaster in United States history, claiming at least 6,000 lives. At its center was Isaac Klein, a meteorologist who famously believed a major hurricane could never actually strike the island city. On September 8th, the Gulf of Mexico rose like a titan, delivering a 15-foot storm surge that essentially scrubbed the island clean. Isaac's own house, a sturdy structure built to withstand many things, was demolished by the crushing weight of a runaway railroad trestle. Amidst the chaos, he and his brother survived by clinging to floating debris, but Isaac's pregnant wife was tragically lost to the waves. The aftermath was a scene from a nightmare, with funeral pyres lighting the night sky because the ground was too saturated for burials. This event was so massive it led to the construction of the famous seawall, a concrete shield that still protects the survivors' descendants today. 32. The Jasmine's Axe of New Orleans. In 1918 and 1919, the city of New Orleans, Louisiana was gripped by the terror of a serial killer known only as the Axeman. This figure didn't just leave bodies, he left a letter that solidified his place in dark folklore. He claimed to be a demon from hell and promised to strike again on a specific Tuesday night at precisely 12:15. However, he offered a bizarre reprieve. He would spare any household where a jazz band was playing. That night, the city transformed into a frantic, brass-heavy carnival. Professional musicians and amateurs alike blew trumpets and banged drums with the desperation of soldiers in a trench. Every dance hall was packed, and the air was thick with syncopated rhythms as citizens literally played for their lives. The Axeman kept his word. No one died that evening. He eventually vanished into the humid shadows of history, his identity never discovered by the police. 31. The 7-foot shadow of Savannah. Deep within the Colonial Park Cemetery in Savannah, Georgia, lies the legend of René Rondelier. Stories describe René as a massive man, standing over 7 feet tall, who was accused of horrific crimes against the children of the colonial town. In a fit of frontier justice, a mob allegedly lynched him near the cemetery walls. However, death seemed to be a mere suggestion for René. Legends say his giant, translucent silhouette still wanders the brick pathways, appearing as a looming shadow that dwarfs the living. While skeptics claim he is a fabrication of tour guides, the intensity of the sighting suggests a lingering cultural trauma. During recent renovations, skeletal remains of an exceptionally tall individual were reportedly found under a nearby hotel, adding a chilling layer of physical evidence to the tall tale. Whether a ghost or a lingering memory of a dark past, René remains the most imposing figure in the most haunted city in the South. Before continuing, be sure to subscribe and leave a like to keep discovering the strange and incredible geography of our entire country. 30. The Vanishing of Roanoke Island. In 1587, over 100 English men, women, and children settled on Roanoke Island in North Carolina, dreaming of a new life. When their governor, John White, returned 3 years later after being delayed by the Spanish Armada, he found the settlement completely deserted. There were no bodies, no signs of a struggle, and no burnt ruins. Just a single word carved into a wooden post: Croatoan. This cryptic message has fueled centuries of speculation, ranging from assimilation with local tribes to a supernatural mass abduction. The mystery is like a puzzle where the pieces were scattered into the Atlantic. Some believe the colonists moved inland to live with the natives, while others whisper about a dark fate involving the island itself. To this day, the lost colony remains the ultimate cold case of American history, a haunting reminder that the New World was often a place where entire groups could simply fade into the mist. 29. The Richmond Vampire and the Tunnel Collapse. In 1925, a disastrous cave-in occurred in the Churchill Tunnel in Richmond, Virginia, trapping a work train and killing several laborers. According to local chronicles, witnesses saw a blood-streaked creature with jagged teeth and flaps of hanging skin emerge from the wreckage. This vampire supposedly fled the scene and took refuge in the nearby Hollywood Cemetery, disappearing into the ornate mausoleum of W. W. Poole. History provides a more grounded yet equally tragic explanation. The creature was likely Benjamin Mosby, a railroad fireman who was horribly scalded by a ruptured boiler. In shock and with skin peeling from his upper body, he managed to crawl out of the tunnel before succumbing to his injuries. However, the legend proved more resilient than the facts. To this day, the tomb of W.W. Poole remains a focal point for those who believe the tunnel collapse awakened an ancient, thirsty evil that still slumbers in the heart of Virginia. 28. The unlikely megaliths of Coral Castle. In Homestead, Florida, stands a structure that defies conventional engineering logic, Coral Castle. It was built single-handedly by Edward Leedskull Neen, a tiny Latvian immigrant who weighed barely 100 pounds. Using only basic tools and his own secret methods, he moved and carved over 1,100 tons of oolite limestone. Ed claimed he knew the secrets used to build the Egyptian pyramids and spoke often of magnetic currents. He worked mostly at night, and neighbors occasionally whispered that they saw massive stones floating through the air like balloons. The centerpiece is a 9-ton revolving gate that for decades could be pushed open with a single finger by a child. When it finally broke in 1986, it took 6 men and a massive crane just to move it. Ed took his secrets to the grave in 1951, leaving behind a stone labyrinth that stands as a silent monument to a heartbroken man's seemingly impossible physical labor. 27. The Bell Witch of Tennessee. The haunting of the Bell family in Adams, Tennessee is perhaps the most documented supernatural event in American history. Starting in 1817, John Bell and his family were tormented by an invisible entity that could speak, sing, and physically assault them. This was no mere ghost. The entity, often called Kate, took a particular interest in John Bell, eventually claiming she would be the death of him. The haunting became so famous that even General Andrew Jackson reportedly visited and fled after experiencing the entity's power. In 1820, John Bell died after falling into a strange coma. A vial of mysterious liquid was found by his bed, which the witch gleefully claimed she had administered. At his funeral, the entity was said to have sung rowdy drinking songs, mocking the mourners. It remains the only case in United States lore where a spirit is legally credited with causing a human's death, a dark stain on the volunteer state. 26. The search for Alice Flagg's ring. Along the coast of Murrells Inlet, South Carolina, the spirit of Alice Flagg is said to haunt the marshy grounds of the Hermitage. Born into a wealthy family in the mid-1800s, Alice fell in love with a humble lumberman, a match her brother Dr. Allard Flagg strictly forbade. In secret, Alice wore her lover's engagement ring on a ribbon hidden beneath her dress. When she fell ill with malaria and died, her brother discovered the ring and, in a rage, threw it into the salt marsh. Ever since, visitors to the All Saints Episcopal Church Cemetery have reported seeing a girl in a white dress clutching her chest, desperately searching for her lost token of love. It is common for people to walk around her grave 3 times backward, hoping to feel a tug on their own rings. Her story is a poignant chronicle of how social status and heartbreak can leave a lasting echo in the Lowcountry. 25. The Greenbrier Ghost Testimony. The death of Zona Heaster Shue in 1897 appeared to be a tragic case of everlasting faint, according to the local doctor in Greenbrier County, West Virginia. However, Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heaster, was unconvinced. She claimed that for 4 consecutive nights, Zona's ghost appeared at her bedside, revealing that her husband, Erasmus Shue, had actually broken her neck. This haunting was not just a family story, it became the catalyst for a legal first. Mary Jane's persistence forced an exhumation and autopsy, which confirmed that Zona's neck had indeed been snapped. During the subsequent trial, the mother's ghostly testimony was actually used as evidence, leading to Erasmus Shue's conviction. He was sentenced to life in prison, marking the only time in United States history that a ghost's testimony helped convict a murderer. This event cemented the Greenbrier ghost in the annals of Southern legal history as a spirit who literally sought justice from beyond. 24. The Curse of the Black Aggie. In Pikesville, Maryland, a statue known as Black Aggie once sat in the Druid Ridge Cemetery guarding the Agnes family plot. The figure was a shrouded, somber woman in bronze, but she became the focus of terrifying urban legends. Local beliefs held that her eyes would glow red at midnight, and that anyone who dared to sit in her lap would meet an untimely, gruesome death. One famous chronicle involves a fraternity hazing where a pledge was forced to sit on the statue. He was reported reportedly found dead of fright the next morning. The ground around the pedestal was famously barren, as if the grass itself refused to grow in her shadow. The constant vandalism and late-night trespassing eventually forced the family to donate the statue to the Smithsonian. Today, she resides in a quiet courtyard in Washington, but the legends of her nocturnal activities still haunt the memories of those who remember her original eerie home. 23. The 101 Ranch Wild West Empire. Oklahoma was once home to the legendary 101 Ranch, a massive 110,000-acre spread that was much more than just a place for cattle. Founded by George Miller, it became a self-contained empire with its own school, church, and general store. However, its most famous contribution was the 101 Ranch Wild West show. This wasn't just a small rodeo, it was a global phenomenon that featured iconic figures like Bill Pickett, the inventor of steer wrestling, and even a young Will Rogers. The ranch was a place where the myth of the American West was manufactured and exported to the world. It was so influential that it even hosted the first cowboy movies, utilizing the vast landscape as a backdrop for the birth of a new cinematic genre. Though the Great Depression eventually dismantled the ranch, its legacy as the cradle of Western folklore remains a cornerstone of Oklahoma's historical identity, proving that truth is often as grand as any tall tale. 22. The Beast of Boggy Creek. In the small town of Fuchs, Arkansas, a legend began to stir in the early 1970s that would eventually captivate the entire nation. It concerned a creature described as a large, foul-smelling hominid covered in thick, dark hair, standing roughly 7 feet tall. The local chronicles are filled with stories of the beast attacking livestock and even terrorizing a family in their home on a humid night in 1971. This wasn't just a campfire story, it was a physical presence that left behind three-toed footprints and a lingering sense of dread in the swampy woods. The intensity of the sightings led to the creation of a famous documentary-style film that blurred the lines between reality and folklore. To this day, the dense thickets surrounding Boggy Creek remain a place of intrigue, where many locals believe that something ancient and undiscovered still lurks. It is a classic piece of southern cryptozoology that remains as sticky and uncomfortable as an Arkansas summer. 21. The Blood Feud of the Tug Fork. The border between Kentucky and West Virginia was the stage for the most famous family rivalry in American history, the Hatfield and McCoy feud. What began as a dispute over a stolen hog and Civil War tensions spiraled into a decade of calculated violence and midnight raids. The Hatfields, led by Devil Anse, and the McCoys, led by Randall, engaged in a cycle of revenge that felt more like a small-scale war than a neighborly disagreement. One of the darkest chapters involved the 1888 New Year's Night Massacre, where the McCoy cabin was burned to the ground and 2 children were killed in the chaos. The feud became so intense that the governors of both states had to call in the militia to prevent a total collapse of order. This wasn't just a hillbilly caricature, it was a tragic chronicle of how honor and pride can lead to a generational cycle of bloodshed that defined the Appalachian spirit for decades. 20. The Deal at the Crossroads. In the dusty town of Clarksdale, Mississippi, a young bluesman named Robert Johnson supposedly made a deal that changed music forever. The chronicle tells of a struggling musician who disappeared for several months and returned with a supernatural mastery of the guitar. Legend has it that he took his instrument to the intersection of Highway 49 and Highway 61 at midnight. There, he met a tall, dark man who tuned his guitar and handed it back, granting him unparalleled skill in exchange for his eternal soul. Johnson's music was filled with haunting references to hellhounds and the devil, adding a layer of eerie authenticity to the story. He died mysteriously at the young age of 27, purportedly poisoned by a jealous husband. Whether he truly met a spirit or simply practiced with obsessive focus, the Crossroads remains a symbolic site for the birth of the blues, where the price of genius was seemingly a very heavy debt. 19. The Ghostly Candles of the Drish House. Tuscaloosa, Alabama, is home to the Drish House, a grand mansion that holds a particularly luminous legend. The home was built by John Drish, a prominent doctor who died in 1867 after a tragic fall down the stairs. His wife, Sarah, was so consumed by grief that she became obsessed with the candles used at his funeral, insisting they be used for her own service when the time came. However, when she died years later, the candles were nowhere to be found. Local folklore suggests that Sarah's spirit has been trying trying to light her own way ever since. Witnesses have reported seeing ghostly candles flickering in the upper windows of the abandoned house, even when no electricity was connected. Some have even described a spectral fire that appears to consume the tower, only for the house to remain perfectly intact once the fire department arrives. It is a glowing reminder of a promise unkept and a love that refused to fade. 18. The Phantom Ship of Cape Henlopen. Along the windswept coast of Delaware, the legend of the Phantom Ship of Cape Henlopen has been whispered for centuries. The story centers on a British vessel that was allegedly lured to its doom during a storm by mooncussers, criminals who used false lanterns to trick ships into crashing against the shoals. On certain foggy nights, sailors and beachcombers claimed to see the shimmering silhouette of a three-masted schooner gliding through the mist without making a single sound. The most chilling detail of this chronicle is that the ship is said to appear just before a major disaster at sea, acting as a spectral warning. The Cape Henlopen Lighthouse, which stood as a sentinel for over 150 years before collapsing into the ocean in 1926, was often the site of these sightings. For many in Delaware, the Phantom Ship is a lingering echo of the dangerous and deceptive history of the Atlantic coast, where the light could be your savior or your doom. 17. The Demon Cat of the Capitol. Deep within the basement of the United States Capitol building in the District of Columbia, a feline phantom is said to prowl the corridors. Known as the Demon Cat, this entity reportedly appears as a small kitten before swelling to the size of a giant tiger when approached. The legend dates back to the late 1800s, with a famous account from 1898 describing a night watchman who fired his pistol at the creature, only for it to vanish into thin air. Many believe the cat appears as a harbinger of national tragedy, with sightings reported before the assassination of Abraham Lincoln and the 1929 stock market crash. Skeptics point to the numerous stray cats that once lived in the building to catch rats, but the presence of small feline-shaped paw prints embedded in the old concrete near the Supreme Court chamber suggests a more permanent resident. It is a bizarre, symbolic piece of Washington lore that keeps many guards looking over their shoulders. 16. The Mystery of the Marfa Lights. On the high desert plateau of West Texas, near the town of Marfa, mysterious orbs of light have appeared for over a century. Known as the Marfa Lights, these basketball-sized spheres of white, yellow, and red glow often dance across the Mitchell Flat, appearing to split apart or merge together. The first recorded sighting was in 1883 by a young cowhand named Robert Reed Ellison, who initially thought they were Apache campfires. However, when he investigated the next morning, there were no ashes or signs of human activity. Scientists have attempted to explain the phenomenon as atmospheric reflections or swamp gas, but the intensity and longevity of the sightings defy a simple answer. For the people of Texas, the lights are a source of pride and mystery, a natural light show that occurs without a stage or a source. They remain one of the most persistent unexplained events in the South, drawing thousands of curious travelers to the lonely desert every year. 15. The Voodoo Queen's Final Rest. New Orleans, Louisiana is a city defined by its relationship with the supernatural, and no figure looms larger than Marie Laveau. As the Voodoo Queen of the mid-1800s, she was a woman of immense power and influence, serving as a hairdresser to the elite while conducting rituals that supposedly influenced the city's politics and weather. The chronicle of her life is a blend of charitable works and terrifying rumors. Even in death, her influence persists at St. Louis Cemetery No. 1. For decades, visitors have marked 3 small crosses on her white mausoleum, hoping she will grant them a favor from beyond the veil. Local popular belief held that if your wish came true, you had to return and leave an offering. While the city has recently cracked down on the graffiti to preserve the tomb, the aura of Marie Laveau remains as thick as the humid air of the French Quarter, a testament to a woman who mastered the art of mystery. 14. The Tragedy of Mary Fagan. In 1913, the city of Atlanta, Georgia, was rocked by a crime that exposed the deep-seated tensions of the post-Civil War South. The body of 13-year-old Mary Fagan was discovered in the basement of the National Pencil Company, leading to the arrest of her superintendent, Leo Frank. The trial was a media circus, fueled by yellow journalism and a public hunger for vengeance. Frank was a Northern Jew, making him an easy target for local resentment. Despite conflicting evidence and a lack of physical proof, he was convicted and sentenced to death. When the governor commuted his sentence to life in prison, a mob calling themselves the Knights of Mary Fagan kidnapped Frank and lynched him. This event led to the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan and the formation of the Anti-Defamation League. It is a dark, symbolic tale of how fear and prejudice can warp the gears of justice, leaving a permanent scar on the history of Georgia. 13. The Orbs of Brown Mountain. For generations, residents of Burke County, North Carolina, have witnessed glowing spheres rising from the ridges of Brown Mountain. These lights, which appear as flickering orbs of varying colors, have been documented since at least 1913. The United States Geological Survey has conducted multiple studies, once even suggesting the lights were reflections from locomotive headlights. But the sightings continued even after the local railroad was destroyed by a flood. Native American fables suggest the lights are the torches of spirits searching for fallen warriors, while others believe they are geological anomalies caused by natural gases. The intensity of the mystery is so great that it has inspired songs and even episodes of national television shows. Unlike many urban legends, the Brown Mountain Lights are a verifiable visual phenomenon that scientists still cannot fully explain, making them a cornerstone of North Carolina folklore. They serve as a reminder that the Appalachian Mountains still hold secrets that modern technology cannot touch. 12. The Legend of the Bunny Man. In the quiet suburbs of Fairfax County, Virginia, a dark tale began to circulate in 1970 that turned a simple bridge into a sight of terror. The legend involves a man dressed in a white rabbit suit who reportedly threatened people with a hatchet near the Colchester overpass. The first documented encounter occurred when a couple in a car were startled by a figure who smashed their window and screamed about trespassing on private property. A few weeks later, a security guard spotted a similar figure chopping at a porch railing with an axe. While no one was seriously injured, the story evolved into a terrifying chronicle involving escaped mental patients and gruesome murders hanging from the bridge. Though historians have debunked the more violent versions of the story, the Bunnyman Bridge remains a popular spot for thrill seekers. It is a modern piece of folklore that perfectly captures the unease that can exist even in the most peaceful southern neighborhoods. 11. The Peculiar Death of Edgar Allan Poe. In early October 1849, the streets of Baltimore, Maryland became the setting for one of the greatest literary enigmas in history. Edgar Allan Poe, the master of the macabre, was discovered in a state of utter delirium outside a tavern used as a polling station. Strangely, he was dressed in cheap, ill-fitting clothes that were clearly not his own. He was rushed to a local hospital where he spent his final days drifting in and out of consciousness, repeatedly calling out for a mysterious individual named Reynolds. Poe was never coherent enough to explain where he had been for the past week, or how he had come to be in such a pitiful condition. Many chronicles suggest he was a victim of cooping, a practice where gangs kidnapped citizens to force them to vote multiple times. However, the true cause of his distress remains a dark puzzle that Poe himself might have written. He died alone, leaving behind a mystery as haunting as his poetry. Before moving on to story number 10, remember to subscribe and like to become an expert on the history of our wonderful country. 10. The Lizard Man of Scape Ore Swamp. During the sweltering summer of 1988, the residents of Lee County, South Carolina, encountered a creature that defied every known biological classification. It began when 17-year-old Christopher Davis stopped to change a flat tire near Scape Ore Swamp. He reported that a 7-foot-tall being with leathery green skin and glowing red eyes emerged from the darkness and leaped onto the roof of his car. The intensity of the encounter left the vehicle with deep claw marks and crushed side mirrors. This wasn't an isolated event. Several other locals soon reported missing livestock and strange three-toed footprints pressed into the muddy banks of the swamp. The Chronicle of the Lizard Man turned the small town of Bishopville into a hub for monster hunters and media outlets. While skeptics suggested a bear or an escaped exotic pet, the sheer terror in the witnesses' voices suggested something far more primal. Even today, the swamp remains a place where people keep their car doors locked tight. 9. The Skunk Ape of the Everglades. Deep within the sawgrass and cypress domes of the Florida Everglades, a pungent legend has lingered for decades. Known as the skunk ape, this creature is Florida's own version of Bigfoot, though it is said to be much smaller and significantly more odorous. The chronicle gained national attention in the late 1990s when a resident of Sarasota County mailed photographs to the local sheriff's office. The images depicted a shaggy, ape-like figure peering through the dense palmetto leaves. Many locals believe the skunk ape is an ancient primate that adapted to the unique watery environment of the South. Witnesses often describe an overwhelming scent of rotten eggs and wet dog that precedes any sighting. While wildlife experts often attribute these encounters to misidentified black bears or escaped orangutans, the intensity of the sightings keeps the legend alive. Whether it is a relic of the past or a figment of the humidity, the skunk ape remains Florida's most elusive and aromatic resident. 8. The Gray Man of Pawleys Island. On the misty shores of Pawleys Island, South Carolina, a spectral figure known as the Gray Man has acted as a guardian for over a century. Legend says he was a young man who died in the marsh while rushing to see his fiancée before a storm. According to the Chronicle, he first appeared in 1822 to warn his beloved and her family to flee the coast. They listened and survived a devastating hurricane that leveled the rest of the island. Since then, his appearance is considered a dire omen of an approaching cyclone. Multiple residents claim to have seen a man dressed in gray clothing wandering the dunes just before major storms like Hurricane Hazel or Hurricane Hugo. Those who see him and heed his warning often find their homes miraculously spared from the worst of the destruction. He is a rare example of a ghost whose presence brings safety rather than fear, a quiet sentinel watching over the unpredictable Atlantic. 7. The Legend of the Cherokee Rose. The Trail of Tears is a somber chronicle of forced migration that deeply affected the states of Georgia and Tennessee in 1838. As the Cherokee people were driven from their ancestral homelands toward Oklahoma, the suffering of the elders and children was immense. According to a beautiful and symbolic fable, the mothers of the tribe cried so many tears of grief that the elders prayed for a sign to lift their spirits. In response, wherever a tear hit the dusty ground, a white rose with a golden center began to bloom. The white petals represented the mother's tears, while the gold center symbolized the gold that had been taken from their lands. These Cherokee roses grew rapidly along the path, providing a trail of beauty in the midst of tragedy. Today, the Cherokee rose is the official state flower of Georgia, serving as a living monument to the resilience and enduring legacy of a people who refused to be forgotten by history. 6. The tragic execution of Mary the Elephant. In 1916, the town of Irwin, Tennessee became the site of one of the most bizarre and tragic events in the history of the American circus. Mary was a 5-ton Asian elephant who worked for Sparks' World Famous shows. During a performance, a distracted handler reportedly prodded her with a hook, causing the elephant to react with fatal violence. The resulting public outcry was so intense that the town demanded justice for the fallen man. In a surreal turn of events, the circus owners decided to hold a public execution using a massive industrial crane. On a rainy afternoon, Mary was led to the local railroad yard where thousands of people gathered to witness the spectacle. The first attempt failed when a chain snapped, but the second attempt was successful. This chronicle remains a haunting reminder of the complex and sometimes cruel relationship between humans and animals in the early 20th century, leaving a dark shadow over the hills of East Tennessee. 5. The Sultana Maritime Disaster. While the sinking of the Titanic is a global legend, the greatest maritime disaster in United States history actually occurred on the Mississippi River near Arkansas in 1865. The Sultana was a wooden steamboat overcrowded with thousands of Union soldiers who had recently been released from Confederate prison camps. Despite having a capacity for only 376 people, the boat was carrying over 2,100 passengers. In the dark hours of April 27th, 3 of the boat's 4 boilers suddenly exploded, tearing the vessel apart and sending passengers into the icy, flooded river. The intensity of the fire was so great that it could be seen for miles. Approximately 1,168 people perished in the tragedy, more than died on the Titanic. Because the event happened just weeks after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, it received surprisingly little media coverage at the time. Today, it remains a forgotten chronicle of the Civil War era, a silent catastrophe hidden beneath the river's muddy surface. 4. The Spirits of the Alamo. The Alamo and San think they were ancient guardians of the mission itself. To this day, the Alamo remains standing, protected by its history and perhaps by those who refuse to leave it. 3. The Maryland Goatman. In the early 1970s, the rural roads of Prince George's County, Maryland became the hunting ground for a creature known as the Goatman. This urban legend describes a half-man, half-goat hybrid that supposedly escaped from a secret government laboratory at the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center. The chronicle began with reports of missing pets and a series of gruesome discoveries along Fletchertown Road. Witnesses described a towering figure with the horns and lower body of a goat, wielding an axe with terrifying precision. One specific event involved a group of teenagers who claimed the creature attacked their car, leaving deep gouges in the metal. The intensity of the local panic led to several police investigations, though no physical evidence of a mutant was ever found. While many dismiss the Goatman as a classic campfire story, the legend persists as a symbolic warning about the dangers of scientific experimentation and the dark mysteries that hide in the suburban woods of Maryland. 2. The Spooklight of Hornet. On a lonely stretch of gravel Gravel Road near the border of Oklahoma and Missouri, a mysterious light has appeared with mechanical regularity since 1881. Known as the Tri-State Spook Light or the Hornet Light, this orb of glowing energy often appears at the end of a long, straight path through the trees. It varies in size from a small spark to a large hovering basketball, frequently changing colors from white to deep orange. The chronicle of the light is filled with fables, including the spirit of an Indian maiden searching for her lover or a miner looking for his lost lantern. Scientific teams from across the country have attempted to explain the phenomenon as reflections of distant car headlights, but the light predates the invention of the automobile by decades. The intensity of the mystery has made Quapaw a destination for the curious, where the silent, dancing light remains a persistent challenge to our understanding of the natural and supernatural world. 1. The Georgia Guidestones. In 1980, a mysterious man using the pseudonym R.C. Christian commissioned a massive granite monument in Elbert County, Georgia. Known as the Georgia Guidestones, the structure consisted of 6 massive slabs inscribed with 10 guidelines for a new age of reason in 8 different languages. The stones also served as a sophisticated astronomical calendar, perfectly aligned with the North Star and the sun's cycles. The chronicle of their construction was shrouded in secrecy, with the anonymous sponsor claiming to represent a small group of loyal Americans. Popular beliefs surrounding the stones range from them being a blueprint for a global conspiracy to a message of peace for a post-apocalyptic world. In July 2022, the intensity of the debate reached a breaking point when the monument was partially destroyed by an explosive device and subsequently dismantled by the state for safety. The identity of their creator and the true intent behind the stones remains the South's most modern and baffling enigma. After watching these 33 stories about the southern states of the United States, tell us, did you know any of them? Which one did you like best, or which one surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments. Let's see how many of us share the same story. And if you think we've missed something or want to add something, we'd love to hear from you. Your feedback helps us improve each video. Also, if you noticed any pronunciation mistakes, thank you for your patience. We strive to improve with every video. And speaking of videos, there's another one playing right now so you can continue exploring the history of our beautiful country. But before you go, don't forget to subscribe and like so we can keep learning together. See you in the next one.